Founded in 2007, Wellington Phoenix are one of the few clubs in world football to compete in a league of a different confederation, which is the AFC, from the country where they are actually based, which of course is the OFC. The Phoenix compete in the Australian A-League under license from Football Federation Australia, even though they are based in New Zealand. Wellington entered the 2007-2008 competition after its formation in March 2007 by New Zealand Football to replace the New Zealand Knights as the New Zealand-based club in the Australian A-League. In today's video, we will be taking over this club and trying to win an A-League title as a guest in the league. Will we get this job done, or will we fail? Let's get into it. Looking at the history of a club, it is strange to see its entirety on one screen, but their best finish in the A-League was in the 2019-2020 season, when they actually finished third in the league. Tactic-wise, we will be using 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗬𝗓 Superman in this rebuild, and this is how it looks in-game with the current Wellington squad. The key players to keep an eye on in this team are definitely up front. Behind the striker, we have 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗘𝗚, who looks well-rounded and is a Bulgarian international with 3 international goals to his name. Playing as the striker, we have English journeyman David Ball, who has played for the likes of Bradford, Rotherham, Fleetwood Town, Rochdale, Peterborough and Swindon. He is 32 years old, but is going to be a good striker for this first season at least. Before we get into the season, we've had the longest pre-season in the world, which has sadly seen us exit the Australian Cup in a game that we weren't even in charge of. We lost the game 2-1 on the road to Brisbane Roar, with us apparently playing a 4-4-2. So with that cup exit, we only have one competition to deal with this season, and that is the A-League. And looking at the pre-season odds of 150-1, we are not fancied this season and are expected to finish in 8th. We were much better than I was expecting this season and took the league by storm, and even qualified for the final series by finishing top of the regular season table with only 2 defeats all season. By finishing top, we managed to avoid the elimination final and would take on Melbourne City in the semi-finals over 2 legs. The first leg was in Australia and had lots of goals. 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗘𝗚 gave us the lead from the spot in a goal that was cancelled out by 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗔𝗚, who headed home from a set piece. We then took control of this game as David Ball and 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏 put us into a 3-1 lead before Melbourne were able to pull a goal back from the spot deep into injury time. Back in New Zealand, we made an absolute meal of this game as our defender 𝗕𝗪𝗏𝗏 gifted a goal to 𝗪𝗪𝗍𝗍𝗏, who rifled past our goalkeeper to make the tie all square. That goal even sent the game into extra time, where substitute and New Zealand international Costa Barbarossas was able to fire us into the final, where we take on Brisbane Roar. Brisbane knocked us out of the cup before we took over, so we were definitely out for blood this time, and 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏 headed us into the lead before centre-back Scott Wootton fired in from range to see us lift 2 trophies in our first season. I guess we best build a trophy cabinet. However, from looking at the finances at the end of the season, it doesn't look like we will be able to make much happen, as we have nothing in the transfer budget and we are currently overspending on wages. I guess it's because of all those flights to Australia. Before we move into Season 2, FM24 is now available to pre-order, and if you use the link in the description, you will get yourselves a cheeky little discount with Fanatical, and if you use the code HOODFM at checkout, you can get an extra little saving while supporting me as a creator. Despite having no money, we were able to get a little bit active in the transfer market ahead of Season 2. First of all, we sold veteran striker David Ball to now Championship Shrewsbury Town for £58,000, which I thought was a good deal considering he's now 33. On the incomings, we picked up an Australian youth international right back Gabriel 𝗕𝗏 to give us some depth in that wing back position. We also picked up some experience at the back in Zambia international defender 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗓𝗏, who is a touch on the slower side, but all the technical and mental attributes are there to improve us in that area of the pitch. Oh, and having a centre back whose name is 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗓𝗏 is not lost on me whatsoever. We did splash a little bit of cash to bring in young Italian midfielder Riccardo Laddinetti, who joined us from Ponferrada for a total of £215,000. All three of these lads come straight into our best 11 as we look to defend the A-League title. We've had a hectic pre-season again, and yet again we've crashed out of the Australian Cup before the season has even started. But sadly, we were in charge this season. We took on non-league Rockdale in the first round and coasted to a 4-1 win in Sydney, with striker 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗘𝗡 bagging a brace. In the second round, we were on the road again, and this time taking on Melbourne City. 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗘𝗡 saw his penalty saved by our keeper before we got super generous and gave him another chance from the spot just 14 minutes later. Sadly, this time he sent our keeper the wrong way in what was the only goal of the game to see us exit at the second round stage for a second season in a row. However, this is where the fun comes in, because we're not technically part of the AFC, we're just playing in a league that is part of the AFC. We are not eligible for a continental competition, so this means no AFC Champions League for us, so I guess we're just going to have to focus on things domestically. That is a bit of a loss though. So competitions wise, we just have the A-League to focus on, which I'm hoping means we have another successful season. Looking at the pre-season odds, Melbourne are the favourites to win the league, and we are predicted to finish in 5th with title odds of 16-1. Moving into Season 2, we were electric in the league, and this tactic is really doing the business. We actually managed to top the regular season table without losing a game all season to yet again be crowned champions of Australia, and will enter the final series yet again. In a repeat of last season's semis, we take on title favourites Melbourne City. The first leg was on the road, and Kiwi international Clayton Lewis emphatically fired us into the lead in the tie with the only goal of the game. Back in New Zealand for the second leg, this was a little bit more routine for us. 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗘𝗡 opened the scoring with this lovely effort before 𝗕𝗪𝗏𝗏 and Sase added 2 more goals to give us a comfortable 4-1 aggregate victory. This booked us a place in the final, where we take on 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗡 FC, who were founded in just 2018. We took the lead in the game through a lovely header through Nicholas Pennington before 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗘𝗚 pulled 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗡 level with just 12 minutes to go. The game finished all square through extra time and would be settled via a penalty shootout. Penalties were flying in through both sides until we got to the goalkeepers. Ollie Sale managed to dispatch his spot kick for us, but Philip Curto saw his tame penalty saved to see us win the grand final for the second successive season. We've won the league and the final series both times so far in this rebuild, and I'd love to add an Australian Cup to the mix next season. Money-wise, things are looking up slightly as we have just over £500,000 in the transfer budget to try and improve this already impressive squad. Following back-to-back league titles, we switched things up and brought in some key players who I'm hoping can make a difference for us. First up, we signed Kiwi youth international Keegan Kelly, who has all the physical attributes to be a handful up front, and he joins actually on a scholarship. We also picked up full New Zealand international 𝗪𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗡 to play in either of the cam spots, and he joins us from Torino for a free transfer. Another player to fill in behind the strikers is young Syrian international Mohamed Rehaina, who will offer the key athleticism that we are lacking in that position, and he joins for a steal on 2.9k. And finally, we secured Argentine defender Frederico Torres following his release from Talares, and he will be replacing Stopila, who has moved back to Zambia for 46k. Ahead of the season, this is now how the team are looking, with 2 of our new signings coming into the best 11 in the shape of Torres and Rehaina. We've been woeful in the Australian Cup so far in this rebuild, but I feel that we could turn things around this season. We edged past Central Coast Mariners in the first round thanks to a Jan Sassy goal before dispatching Western Sydney Warriors 3-0 on the road in the second round. This sets up a quarter-final and yet another trip to Sydney to take on Sydney FC. And we managed to dominate the game but didn't score until Keegan Kelly nodded home with just 5 minutes remaining. This all happened during the pre-season period, so we find ourselves in a cup semi-final before the league campaign even kicks off. The board are expecting us to win the league for a 3rd straight season, and that is backed up by the media prediction, as we are odds-on favourites to get the job done. Let's kick off by talking about the league, where we started like a house on fire and managed to secure a 3rd regular season title in a row, this time winning the league by 6 points. This meant that we advanced directly into the final series semi-finals, where we would take on Western Sydney Wanderers over 2 legs. We were on the road in the first leg, where 𝗕𝗪𝗓 went off in the game and bagged himself an impressive hat-trick in a 3-1 victory to give us a 2-goal lead to take back to New Zealand. Back at home, 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗘𝗡 extended the lead in the first minute to give us a 4-1 aggregate lead. Nathaniel Blair did pull a goal back to see the tie end 4-2, but we advanced into the grand final to take on Melbourne Victory. The final was in Wellington, and we managed to dominate the game from start to finish. 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗬𝗓 opened the scoring before Karev calmly slotted a penalty to make it 2-0. 𝗕𝗏𝗏 put the game beyond doubt in the 90th minute by getting his head on a set piece to see us lift back to back grand final titles. We touched on it at the start of the season, but we actually had a little bit of a cup run this time around. It was back to Australia for the semi-final, where we come up against Melbourne City yet again. Wingback Gabriel 𝗕𝗏𝗏 opened the scoring for us inside 5 minutes before Nicholas Pennington got on the end of a great cutback to give us a solid 2-0 lead. Melbourne managed to pull a goal back in the second half through Andrew Nabbott, but 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗑𝗡 was able to restore the 2-goal advantage by latching on to a terrible defensive mistake to send us through to the Australian Cup final for the very first time in the club's history. The final was a cagey affair and even went through 120 minutes goalless to see the game decided by a penalty shootout. Both teams continued to score from the spot until defender Callum Elder saw his penalty saved by Ollie Sale to give 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗓𝗏𝗓 the opportunity to give us the win, and he calmly slotted the penalty to see us secure a historic treble. We're going to have one more season to see if we can repeat all 3 competitions and firmly put the Kiwi stamp on the A-League. We've got just over £250,000 in the transfer budget to play with, so let's go and see who we can sign. Going into this final season, we've actually not signed anybody at all. This is largely down to the poor finances at the club and the £4 million worth of debt that we're in that I cannot seem to shift because of no continental competition. The lack of new signings means this is the best 11 going into the season, and we now have 8 internationals in this side. Yet again, we've had the Australian Cup during pre-season, and for a consecutive season we've progressed to the semi-final stage already. We took on Ingham FC in the first round and put them away with a comfortable 6-0 victory in a game where we actually had 51 total shots. The second round saw us take on Melbourne Knights, and we managed to repeat the scoreline from the first round as 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗓𝗏 bagged an impressive hat-trick. It was a repeat of last season's final in the quarters as we took on Perth Glory. 𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗓 scored an 8-minute hat-trick in the first half to give us a good lead, but Perth got 2 goals back in the second half. However, that wasn't enough, so we will be playing in the semi-finals yet again. This means we will be playing South Melbourne in the semi-finals, so I'll be expecting another finals appearance here because they are a team that does not even play in the A-League. League-wise, we are odds-on favourites to win a 4th title in a row, which is great to see, considering we've not signed anybody this season. We actually found things a little bit harder going this season and even took a lot more L's. However, we were still able to bag a regular season title, but this was the lowest points total we've seen in this save. This meant that we automatically qualified for the final stage semi-finals, where we would take on Macarthur FC. The first leg on the road was one of the biggest nothing games I have ever seen, and it ended 0-0. Back in New Zealand, things were tight again, but 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗓𝗏 put the ball on a plate for 𝗪𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 to tap home the only goal of the tie. This set up a grand final game between ourselves and Sydney FC. However, this was the easiest game of the final series as we cakewalked to the trophy with a comfortable 5-1 victory, thanks to goals from Sermon, Riania, Kelly, Supyuk and Sutton. In the Australian Cup, we had our semi-final against South Melbourne, and this was relatively straightforward as we ran out 4-0 winners with goals from Pennington, Riania and a brace from 𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. This set up back-to-back appearances in the Australian Cup final, and this season we take on Western Sydney Wanderers. Riania opened the scoring with 2 goals in as many minutes before 𝗕𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 pulled a goal back for the Australians. However, our overall superiority was clear for all to see as 𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Marco Lorenz bagged 2 more goals to see us win back-to-back Australian Cups and win a total of 10 trophies in just 4 seasons. Not bad for a team that's not even part of the league, eh?